Abuse in one form or another drives the lion's share of the delivery of mental health services. The domestic violence industry hinges on abusive relationships. Much individual psychotherapy centers on the resolution of childhood abuse or the effects of abusive adult relationships, and frequently both. The results of the various kinds of child abuse, be it physical, sexual, psychological, or a combination thereof, informs us of our ethical responsibility toward children. And our awareness of abuse forms the foundation for healthy boundaries in life. It allows us to know where to draw lines with other people, to know when and where to say no, and when and where to say goodbye, at least in a perfect world. Much has been made of men and abuse. The mental health profession has certainly made exhaustive efforts over the past 40 years to highlight the problem of abusive men. Hundreds of books have been published on that subject. Billions of dollars spent on social service programs to help the victims of abusive men, provided the victims and alleged victims are female. The society at large has responded with overwhelming support. In fact, fighting the problem of abusive men has been a successful enough financial industry that it has spawned laws and governmental acts that rely exclusively on zombie statistics that manage to survive all manner of bombastic and repetitive debunking. So far, no amount of empiricism or contrary data has delivered a headshot to the idea that wherein concerns abuse, men, by their nature, are the problem. How ironic it is, then, that it is women who are society's default abusers. I know the expected social reaction to putting this kind of generalization on women. Generalizations are non grata in today's world. It's even wrong to say that blacks are superior to whites at basketball, even though you only need to look at an NBA roster to know that it's true. Regardless of the moratorium on generalizations, the fact is that any woman you encounter in modern society is more likely to be abusive than not. Actually, it is much more than just likely. Predictably and dependably would be the adverbs of choice to describe the tendency toward being abusive in women. And like any effort we employ to help people spot and avoid abuse, it is crucial to educate men and boys about this as a part of their mental health education. Now, if you're wondering where my citations are, I'm going to disappoint you. Most of this is speculative. I have no great body of research proving women's tendency to abuse the other people in their lives, largely for the same reason that I can link you to a wealth of bogus research on abusive men. Gynocentric societies don't study abusive women, only men. We don't allow the study of abusive women, and indeed will persecute and attack anyone who conducts any kind of study without a gynocentric conclusion. See the link in the low bar to Murray Strauss's paper on suppression of data that does not conform to the gynocentric victim narrative. Also, I don't feel compelled to dwell on the obvious here, that the blanket charge of being abusive doesn't apply to every woman on the planet, that there are exceptions. That is as obvious as Larry Bird. I do think it important, though, to place the onus on men for the problem. Like all other forms of destructive gynocentrism, it is practiced with men's complicity and often at their insistence. It is a woman's problem, but the blame isn't at all limited to females. Moving on, what I have had reported to me over the years by literally hundreds of men is that their experience with women has been abusive to one degree or another. What has been reported was copious amounts of emotional shaming, financial exploitation, sexual blackmail, and other forms of abuse. One of the more common cycles of abuse reported was the extraction of assets and labor through psychological pressure from having their manhood questioned, having sex withheld, or being threatened with emotional or physical abandonment. In marriage, this is often accompanied with the unspoken, looming threat of divorce that is accompanied by the loss of children, property, and freedom, particularly in cases where false allegations are employed by the wife. In the low bar, I'm linking you to a citation from the National Center for Healthcare Research stating that the risk of suicide triples with divorce. Of course, as you would expect in a gynocentric society, the research does not specify the sex of the victims. But we already know that men are 4 times more likely on average than women to kill themselves. And of course, there is no research on a causative link or even a positive correlation between family court abuses and the men who suicide, but I can report anecdotally that suicidal ideation is quite common in my divorcing male clients. They cite both the courts and the abusiveness of their former wives as significant factors in their despondency. There is a great deal of circumstantial evidence to support the claim of universally abusive women, particularly in the case of divorce. We live in a "you go girl, take him to the cleaners" culture. We laud women for going after ruinous divorce settlements. We cheer them on in daytime TV for paternity fraud. We cover and enable their false allegations of domestic and sexual violence by holding out so-called victims as a rationale for not prosecuting women who lie to police about men for the sake of vengeance, leverage in family court, a cover for their infidelity, or simply to seek attention. We exist literally in an abuse culture that favors women. Consequently, it is not just fair to generalize women as abusive, it is the only sane and rational thing to do. As I said earlier, abuse in all its forms shapes and molds an ethical responsibility toward children. I should have clarified, though, that this only really applies to children who are abused by males. The children of abusive mothers or children who are psychologically abused by witnessing the mother's abuse of the father are largely overlooked. In a rare article of its kind in Time magazine, which is linked in the low bar, they describe the problem as follows, and I quote, "Family and intimate relationships, the one area feminists often identify as a key battleground in the war on women, are also an area in which women are most likely to be violent, and not just in response to male aggression, but toward children, elders, female relatives or partners, and nonviolent men," according to a study published in the Journal of Family Violence. Unquote. We currently have an epidemic of school teachers sexually molesting their minor charges, almost all the perpetrators being female. They receive light sentences, often involving no jail time, and are often characterized in hot-for-teacher media coverage that glorifies the sexual abuse of children, provided they are male. I've also linked an example of that in the low bar. The media, despite its admittedly best efforts to conceal the reality of the abuse culture of women, confirms what my anecdotal evidence points to, and what you no doubt really don't need to be told. Society at large is a haven for abusive women, and women, by and large, take refuge in that haven as abusers on all levels without compunction. If they are not being abusive on the overt level of physicality, they are certainly being abusive with the pathological sense of entitlement and petulant, demanding attitude that this culture lauds as an admirable part of the female psyche. It makes the average woman in this society unfit to bond with and certainly unfit to breed with. I don't see this ending anytime soon. Even if we somehow manage to remove the socially imposed gag on generalizing about women, the same forces that created that gag would also make light of, minimize, and even promote the abuse they perpetrate. That abuse has been codified and is now expressed by law and custom in most areas of modern life. After all, What are feminists but the official representatives of the modern woman's abusers' lobby? That leaves men three options in my mind. Compliance with the female abuser is the most common. I don't recommend it. That compliance is, after all, the primary reason women are so abusive. Another option is to just walk away, which many men are doing. I have not opted for that route myself, but I respect the men who do. They are choosing the most reliable path to an abuse-free life. The final path is to take a lesson from the feminist and to embrace the idea that the personal is the political. This allows us the license to sting back, to inflict a cost on the abuser, and to do so without remorse or reservation. It's an old principle with which everyone is familiar and which continues to echo down through the ages. We learned it in grade school, simply and concisely. Abusers are bullies, and all bullies are cowards. If you, figuratively of course, bloody a coward's nose, they quit bullying you. And if you break the bully's nose, they will quit bullying you and will likely have second thoughts about life as a bully. Either way, the bully won't be your problem anymore. And that is it for my talk today. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.